Hello, this is Matt, and this 1, 2, 3 hints is going to focus on Apple Spaces. Now, Spaces generally appears in your dock. Sometimes there's a hotkey on your keyboard that allows you to launch it. You can definitely find it in your Applications folder. And the first time you open Spaces, it will tell you that Spaces isn't set up. Would you like to set it up? And of course, that's what we're going to do. So I'll click on Set Up Spaces. And once I do that, it takes me into the Systems panel for Expose and Spaces. And you can see here it's already selected Spaces for me. Now, what Spaces allows you to do is to create another kind of virtual desktop. And then you can switch back and forth between them. And once we get this set up, I think you'll see where it may be helpful to you. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'd like to enable Spaces. And then by default, it sets up 4 desktops for you. And you can see them here, 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's too many or too few, you can add additional rows by clicking on the plus sign by rows, or you can get rid of a row. You can add additional columns by clicking on the plus sign by columns, or you can get rid of a column. And then there's a hotkey to activate Spaces. In my case, it's going to be F8. So anytime I hit function key number 8 on my keyboard, which is that very top row of keys, it'll bring me into Spaces. And then you can switch between spaces by using Control. That's what the little caret symbol is for. Control and the arrow keys. You can switch directly to a space by hitting Control and the number key. And again, I'll show you how those things work. All right, so Spaces is now all set up. And let's see how this works. So let's begin by launching the chat client. And I'm going to create kind of an internet space where I do all my internet things. So the first thing I'm going to do is launch iChat, and then I'm also going to launch my web browser Safari. Okay, so I've got my web browser open, I've got my buddy list open. So now this is my internet space. Now if I would like, I can switch over to another space, and that can be my my text editing space. So I'm going to hold down the Control key, I'm going to hit the right arrow, and you saw on the bottom there, just momentarily, this little box came up. I'm going to do that again, and so that you can see I'm going to switch back by hitting Control and the left arrow. And you can see while I hold down the Control key here, it's got this box on the bottom. That's a representation of the 4 different desktops that I have. I can navigate among them by using the arrow keys. So there's space number 1. I'm going to right arrow to get over to space number 2. And now here in space number 2, I'll put my address book and my calendar. Okay, great. So I've got my address book and my calendar there. And then I'm going to set up a third space. I'm going to hold down Control and hit the down arrow key to go to, and then the left arrow key to go to space number 3. And in this one, I'm going to put iPhoto. Okay, great. So now I've got iPhoto open. So here is the advantage of Spaces. And this is particularly true if you're working on a laptop. It can be less true if you're working on a very large screen desktop machine. But the advantage here is that I can switch back and forth between these virtual desktops. So here I've got my internet applications over here. I've got my calendar and my my address book. And then if I switch over here, I've got a project that I'm working on in iPhoto. And the nice thing about this is it allows you to have these multiple windows, multiple applications open without having them all clutter up and lie on top of each other in just kind of one primary screen. Now another nice thing about it is you don't have to remember where all the different things were that you opened. As you know, the little glowing dot underneath indicates that an application is running, and if I click on that, it automatically switches me to that space so that I can use that application. So when I clicked on iChat, it took me to my first space, and if I click over here on the calendar, it takes me to my second space where I've got calendar and the address book. And then finally, if I click over here on iPhoto, it takes me to my third space. And once again, you can switch between spaces by holding down the Control key and using the arrows. Another way that you can quickly move from one space to another is Control and then the number of the space. So if I hit Control 1, that takes me to space number 1. If I hit Control 2, that takes me to space number 2. Control 4 would take me to space number 4. I've got nothing on space number 4. I'm not using it right now. There's another way, and that is if you click on the spaces icon in your dock, it will show it to you in this Hollywood Squares type format. And then to switch to a particular space, you just move your cursor to the space and you click on it, and then it brings up that space. So there it took me to space number 2. If I go to spaces and then click on the space number 3 that has the iPhoto on it, it takes me there. Another way to access that, besides pulling it off of your dock, is to hit your hotkey. So you'll remember when we were configuring, F8 was our hotkey. If I hit F8, again, it brings up that Hollywood Squares format, and then I can just go and click in the space that I'd like to go to. So that's how you can configure spaces, how you can move between spaces. One other quick thing I will show you, I'm just going to move over to my first space, is that if you'd like to move a window from one space to another, you can do that by clicking and dragging the window to the edge of the screen, and that will take it to the adjacent space. So I'm in space number 1. If I'd like to take this Safari window and move it over into space number 2, which is to the immediate right, I just go over here, I click and drag it, and then that switches me over to the second space. If I want to go back to the first space, I just drag that window over to the edge, and once again that takes me back to the first space. So that allows you to take windows from one space to another. So that's how you use spaces. Have a great one. This episode is sponsored by My Data Lockbox on the web at mydataLockbox.com. My Data Lockbox provides automatic, secure, off-site protection for your data. Check them out.